Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Tracy Alexander. And coming up in today's newscast.
The painful pinch of COVID-19's economic toll is weighing heavy on Israelis, but what can be done to help ease the financial burden on struggling civilians? Also, what's behind the number of mistaken messages from the Ministry of Health ordering Israelis into quarantine? And a journey to motherhood, how two women are helping empower Israel's expecting mums.
The Prime Minister has likened it to playing an accordion, having to open and close the economy according to the level and rate of coronavirus infections. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that in hindsight, he opened parts of the economy too quickly after the first COVID-19 wave. But now, in the midst of another spike in cases, the Knesset Coronavirus Committee is once again voting on opening gyms and public pools after a heated debate about it Sunday. This as an angry public takes to the streets, and Israel's Energy Minister calls for a 10-day nationwide closure. Here's more.
Haredi lives matter. That's the latest cry coming from ultra-Orthodox communities pushing back against what they say is unfair targeting against their communities amidst the latest outbreak of COVID-19. Pelting officers with eggs and some calling them Nazi anti-Semites. At least 2 people arrested in Jerusalem overnight as demonstrations continued for a second day, setting trash cans on fire and knocking down barriers, cordoning off their neighbourhoods. In one case, setting a chemical toilet on fire and pushing it towards police. Many of the neighbourhoods put under lockdown are majority ultra-Orthodox residents. Video like this one of police reprimanding a 13-year-old religious girl for not wearing her mask, prompting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to meet with several Haredi politicians over their complaints of biased and selective enforcement of health regulations. Thousands of self-employed Israelis continue to ache, discovering that stipends for COVID-19 relief could be far less than what the government promised. Ministers approving up to 7,500 shekels for certain workers hit economically by the lockdowns, but many received notifications that they would actually receive less than 2,000.
חצו על הכפתור כדי שהכסף יגיע לחשבונות בימים הקרובים. מחר אנחנו נביא לממשלה את יתרת התוכנית.
That the Prime Minister's promise at the beginning of Sunday's cabinet meeting, saying he plans to closely monitor the implementation of the country's latest aid package.
אנחנו יכולים להתגבר על הקורונה, או לפחות להביא את ישראל לשגרה כלכלית ובריאותית שמאפשרת לנו לחיות בצורה סבירה בשנה הקרובה. זאת המטרה. That
a day after a 10,000-strong non-partisan protest in Tel Aviv for a public in pain, asking for help and lambasting the government for how long it's taking sufficient aid to reach the hands that need it. Israel has an unemployment rate of some 21% now, and the National Employment Service says it saw an increase of people furloughed and registering as unemployed over the weekend, as new closures renewed to stem a resurgence of the deadly virus. Meantime, in the hospital system, a drug emerging as Israel's new weapon against the virus is running low. At least 2 hospitals are unable to get their hands on remdesivir, developed in the United States and delivered to Israel before much of the rest of the world. Doctors are being wowed by the medicine's effectiveness in treating serious patients. But as Israel's stock depletes, the government is reportedly negotiating with the company and using diplomatic connections to procure more. And nurses are threatening to strike over manpower shortages. Almost 670 nurses have reportedly been put into quarantine, even as hospitals across the country reopen coronavirus wards. And no additional nursing staff are reportedly being added.
Now, another emerging issue is the number of people receiving messages from the Ministry of Health, alerting them that they've been exposed to someone with COVID-19 and ordering them into a 2-week quarantine. Week after week, recipients of the text message are left feeling baffled as to how they might have contracted COVID-19 while sitting in the comfort of their own home. You see, the controversial Shinbet phone and credit card tracking system is being used by the government in a desperate bid to help curb the growing number of infections by following the movement estimates of people who've tested positive for coronavirus. But many Israelis are receiving the order, and then after filing a complaint, some are told their message was in fact a mistake. So what's going on? Well, joining me in studio is cyber expert Omri Segev Moyal. Omri, a pleasure to have you with us. Talk us through what's happening. Why are so many Israelis receiving a message when they're thinking to themselves, I was home that day, no one was around me, there's no chance I've contracted COVID-19?
I think above all is that we're using technology that was built to track terrorists. It was built to work under the scenes and not in this kind of scale, not against this specific problem, which is contact tracing of pandemic. It's a technology that was built to a whole different purpose. Now, as a startup nation and any other countries, they're trying to use something that is more similar. And this is what the most similar thing that a government can think of.
Right, but many people are in fact receiving a message, and when they receive the message, it might be on a Thursday, and it says on Monday, between the hours of say 10 to 11, you were exposed to someone that it tested positive for COVID-19. Meantime, in that gap of say 5 days or even a week, people have been walking around not knowing that they were exposed to somebody, coming home to perhaps their family and children. So is this in fact an effective method at all?
I think it's effective. I'm not an expert in medicine, but in the end, there's a period of 14 days where you can infect other people, give or take. So basically, if you take 50% of that time and put people at home, it will be effective. So there is some effectiveness in this. But the main problem is that because of the technology itself, there's a lot of false positive, which actually cause people to stop using their phone or not even listen to the government.
Right.
If you take other examples of other contact tracing applications and in other countries, for example, when there is a mark which says you have been nearby or you've been in contact with someone with COVID-19, then they tell you where it was. They'll tell you that maybe it was in one of the shops, in one of the restaurants, in the supermarkets, or in home there's a bit of a privacy issue when they don't clear the specific places at home, but you have the ability to say, I wasn't there at all.
Right. But the danger is, and I've spoken to certain people that have in fact called the Ministry of Health when they can finally get through to the Ministry of Health, they'll try and prove where they are, and the Ministry of Health says, well, we can't confirm or deny whether that was the person that exposed you to that. And so therefore people are trying to actually dodge the system, leaving their phones at home, not using their credit cards.
I always push people to go by the laws and everything, so I don't think I can comment on how you can bypass army tactics or anti-terror tactics. I don't think that will be the best way to do it. I think the best way to do it is to limit the amount of places you actually go anyway.
Right.
Because there is a pandemic out there. Try and memorize where you actually have been.
Right.
Maybe use some of the other apps so you can make sure where you've been, and you will have some way to identify and use that with the Ministry of Health. But overall, it's really hard.
Certainly. Understanding, of course, that the system might not be foolproof, but you can do what you can to limit your exposure to other humans and stay laying low. Thank you so much for that insight.
Cheers, everyone.
Now, as money woes and real anxiety riddles a large portion of the Israeli public, many are at a loss as to what to do to make ends meet. But while waiting for government aid, a sense of being out of control can become debilitating. So what can be done to take the power back into your own hands as much as possible? Well, joining me is top Israeli business coach Alon Gal. Alon, a pleasure to have you with us, and much needed advice coming to our audience thanks to you. When you're wondering, of course, now how to make rent, something as basic as rent, which many Israelis are struggling with at the moment, what kind of strategies do you suggest to people?
First of all, I think that, as we all know, that when people are in crisis, they tend to, go into themselves. They're not communicating about their problems. It's not nice to talk about your problems. I don't feel good about myself when I have to say to other people that I have money problems, that I'm having difficulties to pay my rent. And this is the main problem about human being. And in those times, it's tend to be a real problem. Communicate. Talk to your bank. Give them a call. Tell them, okay, this is my situation. This is what I have. This is what I don't have. This is the aid that I need. and be open about it. Talk to your parents, talk to your friends, talk to your brother, talk to your sister. Communication, communication, communication.
Absolutely. But then what can people do then, of course, once you've made those initial points of contact with other people, to perhaps think outside of the box in terms of ways of earning money?
Listen, as we all know, we all have to find new ways to invent ourselves all the time. This is a new market, you know. A second before the coronavirus came to our lives, we needed to be like this anyhow. But, you know, the corona I look at it as something that woken up every one of us. We are now awake. We have to understand that we have to find ways to earn more money. So, if you know how to speak English better than me, so maybe you can help others. Maybe you can make money out of it. You can, I don't know, you can tutor other people in situations that you know best, and you're better than other people and stuff like that. We have, all of us, we have to find now ways to use our abilities and our strong points in order to make more money and to be more inventive.
Right, certainly very good advice. And that's, of course, for the short term. But what kind of investments then could you make that could allow you to perhaps feel safer about the future?
Listen, this is the main problem, you know, because on everyday life, most of the Israeli families used to live from the income and, you know, get to the last shekel, and you know, they don't think about times like this. Okay, the coronavirus came, and we are so surprised. How come you're surprised? If you're living to the last shekel every day, this is a very good time to learn. And let me tell you, this is a very good time for investments, for long-term investments. There are very good opportunities now on the market that people with money can use. And you know that the Israeli people on regular times, listen to me, you know, it's amazing. They are holding something like 1 trillion shekels in the bank, doing nothing, like a rock that's sitting and doesn't earn any shekel, any money for them.
Okay.
So this is the time to make it, to make it
certainly,
different.
just to start perhaps putting 1 or 2 shekels away for a rainy day, perhaps, if that's all that you can manage. Of course, some people, it's not really in their grasp to be able to put too much away, so just a little bit every day. Appreciate that advice. Thanks, Alon. Now, it's an exciting time when you're expecting a child, but if you're a new immigrant to Israel during this COVID-19 pandemic and your parents are abroad, it can be difficult without the support, both practically and emotionally. But thankfully today, an announcement from MK Michal Kotler-Wunsch that the Israeli Population and Immigrations Authorities will be allowing the parents of Olim who are expecting to give birth or have given birth in the past month to travel to Israel to be with their children and new grandchildren. Have a look.
Turned out that there are tens of couples who won't be able to have their parents here with them. And we brought this to the Aliyah and Klita Committee, and thankfully, in preparation for tomorrow's discussion, the Immigration Authority has reviewed the criteria and has changed it so that all of your parents can come and be with you when you do have those incredible babies that you will deliver a month before and a month after your expected delivery.
But not all Olim will have the opportunity to have family support during their pregnancy, and 2 women who immigrated to Israel from abroad have had babies here, and they recognise the importance of extra support for mothers during the process of pregnancy with or without familial support. And Maya Ginsberg and Shai Rubin joined me here in studio to tell us more. Ladies, a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
So Maya, tell us a little bit more, because you moved here to Israel and have had a child here, about to have a second child.
About.
Right? Okay, still have some time. Very exciting. And you started to recognise a need from mothers who are going through pregnancy here, and you started a course on Zoom. Tell us about it.
So basically, when I was pregnant for the first time, I realized that so much of what is focused on is preparation for birth. And then what I started to recognize in my own journey was that there were all these other puzzle pieces. And so basically, Shai and I have put together a course that tries to look at those other pieces and really give women this this time and space to look deeper into themselves, to understand how, as important as that birth is, there's so many other parts of that rite of passage into motherhood that we want to give them really the tools, that again, the time, the space to really look inside, look at their fears in the face, look at each other and speak to each other about this whole journey that they're on. And I think it can really empower them to just have a very different experience at the end of the day.
Such a beautiful experience, making it even more powerful and empowering. So Shai, what are you teaching these mothers to be in the course that you're doing, that perhaps our audience can even get some tools for themselves or share it with their pregnant friends?
Sure. So like Maya said, a lot of that essence of empowerment comes from taking time and holding space for themselves as the women and in the community at large. So a lot of it comes from physical exercises and certain meditations that we do, journaling entries, things like talking to your own mother and finding out about your own birth, kind of mending the relationship there with your own partner. And then we bring in professionals that talk about things like lactation and nutrition and exercise. Doulas and psychologists.
Right. And Maya, why is it so critical to have tools like this along your pregnancy journey?
So again, it's just, we're so busy in our lives that it's so easy to just move through your pregnancy, arrive at that birth, and then you have a baby in your hands. And I think there's so many surprising elements to that journey that if you actually have the time beforehand to sit with yourself, sit with each other, other women, professionals, then I think you can really change the trajectory of that transformation and
Such a beautiful way of cultivating community here, especially for people who might not have parental support they need. Maya and Shai, thank you so much for the work you're doing and for being with us. Now, as we've talked about extensively, it's a challenging time for many during COVID-19, and those who rely on therapists as a way of soothing the soul and unpacking matters of the mind and heart are now having to move from intimate face-to-face sessions to online video meetings. Those who are also looking to find a therapist might feel it's not the right time, since starting to build a relationship online might feel intimidating or less than ideal. So to address these concerns and the impact of online therapy on its effectiveness, psychologist Camilla Forkosh-Lavan joins me in studio. Camilla, great to have you as always.
Thank you.
So let's try and perhaps expel some myths, or at least address some concerns about the effectiveness of online therapy sessions and if it impacts the effectiveness and the quality of those sessions.
So interestingly enough, one would think that it would, because it's not in person, the cup of coffee isn't necessarily there, you have to make your own. But the research shows that it's actually comparable. Which is really, really good news.
So when you see a therapist face-to-face, you're not necessarily getting more than you would in a Zoom session. That makes sense to me when it comes to when you've established a relationship. But what about if you want to seek out a therapist? What do you say to those people that might feel it's quite intimidating to meet someone through a computer screen for the first time?
It's a very, very good point. So it's easier if you meet them on video, because then you do have the same kind of facial expressions and everything you will have. I think it's very important to prepare a little bit ahead of time. Choose the place that you maybe would like to sit, something that's comfortable, that you have your privacy. If there are people around in the house that are running around, then choose maybe when they're not at home, or maybe go sit under some tree or something like that. Find a space that's comfortable for you.
And what about for therapists? Are there ways that a therapist can in fact bring a different kind of approach to a Zoom session to make sure that patients are feeling as comfortable?
So also it's very important to understand that therapists are people. Hi. But so understand that for a lot of us, this whole transition, especially during COVID, was very difficult and very stressful, and we didn't know fumbling around, yes? So it's very important to sit with your own feelings and to realize that some of your anxieties might translate into the therapy session. So deal with those. If you need to go to somebody, have a powwow, but also bring up these kinds of concerns and questions with your clients, even if they don't, so that it's in the open, so that maybe you can have a therapy session about having therapy session, right? That's online. Also, same thing, choose comfortable clothes, choose a place that's perhaps private. The kids aren't flying in and out with birds and dogs and whoever else you have in the house.
Even though it does add that human element, as you say, but of course can be quite disruptive. And for certain clients, it might not be appropriate. There's some people that should check in with themselves before engaging with a therapist over Zoom or Skype.
So again, it's very important to understand that there is going to be a little bit of uncomfortableness for some. For some, it's very easy, yes. But for the ones that feel uncomfortable, do try it and see how it works and give it a few times, because in the beginning it's new, it's weird. So because of the newness, it might might be weird for you, yes? But in general, there are some therapies that are better face-to-face. For example, if there are some developmental difficulties that a person's, that faces, or also social, different kinds of social, depends on the level, okay? So sometimes you can also combine maybe in person and online. So really, there is flexibility to a really, really high degree. You just need to find it.
Certainly, and the most important thing is always to reach out for help, even if it's over the phone, picking up to speak to a friend if you can't access a therapist. Thanks so much for that insight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Camilla. And now for a little update in the world of entertainment and culture, we have Emmanuel Kadosh with us to give us the rundown. Emmanuel, take it away.
Hey, Tracy, we have tons to cover today, like every Monday, so let's just jump straight into it. We'll start off with what happened with NFL star Deshaun Jackson's latest anti-Semitic post. Jackson posted a screenshot to his Instagram account of over 1.4 million people of two quotes from Adolf Hitler, the first saying in part, "Jews will blackmail America," and the other post saying, quote, "White Jews have a plan for world domination."
I saw this all over social media and the news last week, and understandably, it wasn't taken very well at all.
Of course. The Philadelphia Eagles, the team that Jackson plays for, announced on Friday that he has been punished for his actions and also stated that Jackson has, quote, "accepted those consequences." The details of the punishment have yet to be released. However, he did share a post stating that he did not intend for anybody to take offense to what he said and that he should have never posted anything that Hitler did say because he's aware that he's a terrible person. Jewish NFL player Julian Edelman also posted a heartfelt video sharing his opinions on the situation. Take a look at this clip.
I know he said some ugly things, but I do see an opportunity to have a conversation. I'm proud of my Jewish heritage, and for me, it's not just about religion. It's about community and culture as well. I'm unusual because I didn't identify as Jewish until later in my life. Whenever I encountered hatred, it never really felt like it was aimed at me. It was only after I was part of this community that I learned how destructive hate is. Anti-Semitism is one of the oldest forms of hatred. It's rooted in ignorance and fear.
Yeah, very calm and considered response. And I think that the video that Edelman shared is one that everyone at home should go and watch fully. And I also saw, that one Holocaust survivor in particular has actually tried reaching out to help educate him as his way of responding to what he saw as an offensive incident.
That's right. Edward Mossberg, a 94-year-old Holocaust survivor, released an open letter he wrote, in short, explaining the horrific events he and over 6 million Jews like him went through during the Holocaust at the hands of the man that Jackson was so easy to quote. He also went on to invite Jackson to join him on a tour of the Auschwitz concentration camp so that he could better understand the past and learn from his mistakes.
Right, that's amazing. I think when there's a disagreement, no matter how much it hurts, it's often better to try and have an open conversation than just to attack back like we've seen here in these two examples.
Right. All right, so up next, we'll switch gears a little bit and go into lighter news. Right. Seth Rogen's latest upcoming movie, The American Pickles trailer, has just dropped. And to say I'm excited to see this film is an understatement, but let's take a look at the clip from the trailer.
I find good job in pickle factory. Sarah, I make this vow. 100 years, our family will prosper. And then one day, everything changed.
Wow, okay, so for those who haven't heard of the movie, what's it going to be about?
So Rogen plays a Jewish immigrant in the United States in the 1920s who apparently falls into a pickle vat and then wakes up 100 years later to the year 2020. Now, what I found super interesting, other than everything I just said, is that Seth Rogen actually plays both main characters in the movie.
Of course he does. So when can we expect to see this, Em?
So not long, actually. The movie is set to be released on August 6th on HBO Max. So we've been waiting a really long time to see this film, and we only have a little bit less than a month to go.
All right. I am extremely excited to see it. Thank you so much for today's updates, Manuel.
Of course.
All right, well, on that note, let's take a look at the weather forecast.
The weather forecast brought to you by Goy Gentile Lawyers, the freedom that security provides.
Well, Haifa is the only city likely to see some clouds tomorrow. Tonight, a low of 73 degrees Fahrenheit up north. That's 23 degrees Celsius. And while there'll be sunny skies elsewhere, in Haifa, partly cloudy tomorrow with a high of 83 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 28 degrees Celsius. And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. I don't think he's going very far, but that certainly looks like a very good way to get your anger out, maybe. All right, well, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.46 shekels for the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Tracy Alexander, and thank you so much for watching.